The Bike Riders from Jeff Nichols. It's a film about a biker club that grows out of control and slowly turns into a band of misfits. This movie is based on the 1967 photo book by the same name. We follow a group of bikers known as the Vandals, led by Johnny, played by Tom Hardy, after his member Benny, played by Austin Butler, honorably maintains his fidelity to the Vandals when confronted about his jacket. He gets into an altercation that would mark the start of the club going down a very dangerous path. So this film will allure you with edgy 1960s biker shenanigans, but at its core, this is a story about loyalty. It's about a group of boys with a powerful bond, fueled by the passion that they share for riding. They've centered their lives around the Vandals and have become family to one another. The loyalty they show each other is so strong that some of them would be willing to die for the club. The bulk of the story is narrated by Kathy, played by Jodie Comer. She is interviewed about the club years later by Danny, played by Mike Feist. He also interviews her and many of the Vandals members during the club's glory days and captures plenty of photos in the process. Kathy is Benny's wife throughout the club's lifespan, so much of what she talks about revolves around Benny and the boys. It was cool getting to know all of the other supporting characters. Even if it was just on a surface level, Kathy's voiceover gives us a better glimpse of who these guys really are. The camaraderie is the best part of the film. If it's good character dynamics that you're looking for, this movie is filled with them. I was surprised by how very relatable some of these characters were. On the surface, they seem like edgy bikers, but then they start talking and you start to realize that some of them are just very normal working class people. So if you were confused about who the film's main character would be due to the film's marketing, that is totally fair because I'm not even sure who it is after watching it. Kathy, Benny, and Johnny all feel equally like the MCs of this film, considering how much time is spent on each of their experiences. The lack of a very clear protagonist kind of muddled the story a bit. The voiceover would make it seem like Kathy's the main character because it forces us to see things through her perspective. But a lot of those scenes were ones that she wasn't even there for, which forces us to see things through the perspective of the characters that are actually there, mainly Benny and Johnny. Benny and Kathy's relationship is the heart of the movie. Kathy isn't a great judge of character and gives her heart to a guy who isn't exactly the type of person to fully appreciate it. Their romance is where the tension lies because when things start to go south, the pressure is put on their relationship. Kathy has to think about whether or not she can continue exposing herself to so much bedlam, and Benny has to think about which he loves more, his wife or the club. This movie otherwise doesn't really have much tension. I'd say the biggest point of anticipation comes from seeing the club during its glory days and wondering when it will start to deteriorate. So of course, once the club is in the gutter, the movie starts to feel a bit aimless because there just wasn't a clear direction for the story to go in after that. At that point, it just leaves you wondering how things are going to end, which is not really a great feeling when there's still a lot of time left in the movie. So the tone of this movie was actually pretty comedic overall. A lot of these characters are really defined by their quirks. This was surprising considering that this is a movie about a group of bikers that start to sink into a life of crime. It's not really the type of film you would expect to see a lot of humor, but there was a lot of it. It's mostly pretty subtle humor. It's not quippy or punchy, so even if the jokes don't land, they're not gonna make you cringe or anything. But I do think that this movie is another example of how modern cinema is just going too heavy, sprinkling comedy into films that aren't necessarily supposed to be straight up comedy films. I think that a lot less would be a lot more for a movie like this. So if you were a fan of Sons of Anarchy and you have that itch for a similar experience, like you want to see bikers get violent and territorial and then see how those conflicts affect their loved ones, this movie might feel a little bit watered down. Some of the dialogue and subject matter doesn't feel like it fits well with edgy bikers, and instead just feels like what a much more sheltered person would consider to be edgy. For example, one of the guys likes to talk about eating bugs, which is extremely derivative of the silly novels that we read when we were in elementary school. The cast and performances were great. This was definitely one of the best ensembles I've seen in recent films. Tom Hardy was born to play a character like Johnny, and Austin Butler continues to show us the incredible range that he has. Throw in a couple of fun performances from Norman Reedus and Michael Shannon, and it's hard not to love this cast. Jodie Comer speaks in a very rich Chicago accent, which at first I wasn't really sure about, but eventually it started to grow on me. I did watch the film's Academy Conversations video, and they did clarify that she's actually emulating the voice of the real Kathy that she's portraying in this film. She does start to slip up and break on occasion, but for the most part, I thought it was pretty cool that she actually tried to become that person. So I feel a bit mixed about this one. This movie has some great things about it, but In the end, the story just felt a little bit lackluster. It was just a bit underwhelming, and while there were things that I really enjoyed about this film, there just wasn't a whole lot for us to really sink our teeth into. Overall, it's a passable film, even decent, but it just didn't lean hard enough into its strongest qualities. I'm gonna say that this one was just fine. It definitely sits at the top end of films that are merely just fine, but the dials just sat a little bit too low for me to call this a great film. If you like mid-century period films, or if star power is enough to carry a film for you, then you might actually really enjoy this one. But if you have a hard time watching movies that just don't have a clear direction, then this one might be a little bit hard to get through. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really does help the channel grow. I'll see you later this week with my reviews of Kinds of Kindness and A Quiet Place Day 1.